Ballyhooey Hollywood, where any office for your young mechanic can be a panic with just a good-looking plan. And any barmaid can be.
So we are going to hear from Alex regarding stories and how best to communicate them, how to make them meaningful in minds and hearts with people. And we are glad to have you here, Alex. Give us as much background as you'd like on your situation, and then help us write and make better films. Alex.
Well, that's quite a request, Robert. Thanks for that introduction. But in this room, we have several centuries worth of filmmaking expertise. And the title of your group, Visionaries, I think kind of says where you're trying to go here. I envision this session together as certainly more of a dialogue than a lecture from me, because everybody here has a lot that I can learn from. But I think we all have in this room one thing in common, and that is a desire, as I put on this slide, to build a 21st century film community in Utah. And some of us, like Robert, remember, building the film community of the 20th century. And that's in the past. Things have changed a lot. And so we need to talk about how to look forward to the future. Background on me is I started out as an actor. I went to the American Conservatory Theater. I eventually ended up in Sundance in the early days, and that's where I met Frank Daniel. Later on, I did time in LA, during which I studied again with Frank Daniel. I have to be careful because Robert said I studied at USC. I went to classes at USC. I never paid tuition at USC because Frank Daniel had a deal with the university where he could invite people into his film analysis class, and I did that for 2 years, the last 2 years of his life, and worked with him very closely. And of course, the real education happened in the bar across the street after class, where we got the real material. But that's where I got deep into story. If those of you who may not be familiar, anybody not familiar with who Frank Daniel is? Frank was, I would say, without doubt, the greatest film educator ever. He was the founding dean of the Czech Film Academy in Prague after he got his doctorate degree from Moscow, where he went to, the school where Eisenstein and Kuleshov invented cinema, Then he became the first dean of AFI, the American Film Institute, after which he built the graduate program at Columbia with his former student, Milos Forman, after which he became the founding artistic director of the Sundance Institute, and then became the dean of the College of Cinema at USC. And he was a brilliant film theorist, but he was not in the film studies category. Everything he talked about was practical. And I'm appreciating that right now because I'm reading some neurological research that deals with a lot of film studies. And it's amazing to me how the film studies people have nothing to say that is at all useful to a filmmaker, even though they do some research that on a certain level is interesting. But he once said to me, if you want to learn how to make movies, first find out where they're teaching film studies and walk as fast as you can in the opposite direction.
Wow.
Yeah, he could say things like that. But he was a brilliant theorist, and at the same time, everything he said was absolutely practical. You could take it right to your keyboard, you could use it on the set, you could use it in the cutting room. And my last conversations with Frank were about a book he wanted to write, and he died before that book was written. I've now acquired over 300 hours of videotapes of his lectures at USC. We've digitized those, we've transcribed them, and now I and his son are putting those together into the book that Frank never wrote. So anyway, that's the tradition that I come from. He also created film consulting that worked in a very interesting way and is very different from certainly most of what you get in Hollywood. It was all about nurturing writers, nurturing the creativity, getting back to the story they were really trying to tell, rather than flinging notes at people, right? And we've all experienced that. Anyway, so I want to talk about building the 21st century film community in Utah. And so I'm going to throw it out to you guys. What's the vision, Visionaries? Where are we going? What do we want to see? If blank, we did it right. Fill in the blank.
Well, I think we want to see that vision from Spencer Kimball come to fruition that he gave in, help me out here, and that somewhere he gave it to BYU, and have you ever read it?
Like 1969.
Yeah, he says that we will do some of the greatest films, we, as visionaries. I mean, I'm using that term lightly, but he didn't use that term, but he said, we will pay our dues, we will earn our right to make great films. And that was in that symposium that he gave back in 1967, I believe.
76.
What?
I think it was the 100th anniversary.
Yeah, 76.
Yeah. So 50 years ago. Are we there?
I hope so. I don't know if we're there. We're approaching it. We're approaching it.
Are we? Okay, good.
Chris.
Yes.
So here's the problem. So about that time, I was hired by a little
Yeah.
offshoot of Bonneville.
1967.
They wanted to write a Man for All Seasons of Joseph Smith. Carolyn Pearson wrote a script. I wrote a script. I think Keith Atkinson might have written a script, and then a couple of non-members. And Gordon Hinckley and Nathan Tanner, they didn't want the church associated with it. They wanted to have a separate company. But they said, we don't want a Sunday school lesson. You know, Man for All Seasons was gritty, it was violent, it was hardcore. We want a movie that will be shown and win Oscars to the masses. And we all tried to write that, and they sent it to several readers. They kind of like mine the best, so I was given the job to rewrite some of the other ones that kind of made Carolyn Pearson upset. But anyway, when it went to Salt Lake, guess what? They did want a Sunday school lesson.
Yeah.
They did not want, they said the right words. President Kimball said the right words. But deep down, they didn't want anything controversial, anything too violent, anything too, to have a sweet spirit to it.
And since that time, if I can, and I may say some things here today that may raise some hackles, that may get some pushback. I hope so. But what we've had since then is we've developed a certain coding, where we talk about family movies, or we talk about positive social impact, or we talk, and we code things. We've worked towards, certain different markets, okay? But, and I want to talk about that a little bit more later on. But we've developed a certain brand. I taught screenwriting at UVU for 22 years. I saw a huge range of stories. A lot of them very personal, a lot of them very passionate, some of them really very powerful storytelling. None of those movies ever got made. Not here in Utah. those students would graduate and they'd end up working on the set doing Lifetime movies or Hallmark, right?
Right.
And so I'm going to say something here that may be unpopular. I am not, I like having the Sundance Festival here in Utah, but I'm not sorry, for the sake of the film community here, I'm not sorry to see it go. Because having the foremost film festival in the country, maybe the world, here in Utah, allowed us to kind of cosplay as a film community. We could pretend that we were a big film center. But if you look at the great careers that were launched by Sundance, there aren't a lot of Utahns in there. And my concern since then has been not to replace the festival, because the world has a lot of film festivals. I want to see an institute here in Utah to develop Utah filmmakers the way that the Sundance Institute has developed filmmakers for the rest of the world. So I did, so this is something I've been going around, and I've been talking to people all over the state. I went down to St. George, I've talked to all the universities, I've talked to the film commissioners in the counties and the state, I wanted to come up with a comparison. So I looked at a similar community. Not much difference in population, similar strong education, strong filmmaking infrastructure, and to compare to that community and the Utah filmmaking community. Anybody want to take a shot at what I was looking at?
Jewish Film Institute.
Jewish? No. No, I was going for a region. New Zealand.
Wow. Cool.
Population, Utah, 3.5 million. New Zealand, 5.3 million. Not a huge difference. Abundant shooting locations, yes. Skilled crew and talent base, yes. Quality academic training, yes. I looked at the top 8 filmmakers. Award nominations, Utah 19, New Zealand 425. Award wins, Utah 53, New Zealand 467. Oscar nominations, Utah 1. That was the Hess, Jared and Jerusha, who got an Oscar nomination for Best Short. New Zealand has 19 nominations for Oscars. Utah has 0 wins and New Zealand has 6 wins. And box office revenues are this is from a year ago, so these numbers are not accurate as of today, but it was 1.2 million versus 19 billion. And then if you subtract the 2 outliers, who are Jared Hess, who, when I first made this graph, had just opened the Minecraft kit, and it grossed over $1 billion, right?
Yeah.
So if you subtract Jared Hess and Peter Jackson, you end up with 33 million for Utah and around 13 billion for New Zealand.
Wow.
Now, is this a completely fair comparison? No, there's streaming, there's a lot of consideration. But the question arises, are the Kiwis 500 times better than we are? Robert.
I'm wondering if you factored into that. I worked for Sun Classic Pictures in Salt Lake for 2 years. We did, several network television series. We did a number of, and I wrote the screenplay for a feature documentary that over a lifetime earned over 22 million.
Okay.
Is that sort of thing factored in, or are you?
No, it's not. And this is an unfair comparison. But it's just to get your attention, right?
Yeah.
And I think on a certain level, it is a fair comparison. Because the point is, we should be doing a whole lot better. And we'll talk about that, yes.
I think the big difference is the the nerve and the resources to do really good storytelling. There's just about everything that's coming out of Hollywood right now is just a rehash, and it's flat. I try to go to a movie a week just to see what's coming out, and I've been bored stiff with most of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
And if Utah wants to jump into the 21st, 22nd century, move forward, we've got to have the nerve, the ambition to really tell good stories in an incredibly effective way.
I think you're right, and I would add one thing to that. One thing that differs, that makes the Kiwis different from us, and that is that we have been spoiled by a locked-in local market that tops out at $3 million. So we can get away with making $500,000 movies, and we can make a return on investment because we've got this locked-in audience, but we are not thinking globally. And the New Zealanders are. I've been on a lot of sets in Utah. I've heard a lot of people talk about their film that they're making. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard people saying, we're going to submit to Sundance. Yeah, we're going to go to Sundance. Well, they don't go to Sundance, but they're going to submit to Sundance. You know what I have never, ever heard on a Utah set or from a Utah filmmaker? We're going to submit to Cannes. We're going to Berlinale. We want to go to Venice. And the Kiwis are. They're going global, which means you have to reach a different kind of audience. Now, I'm not telling you guys anything you don't know. Filmmaking is a three-legged stool. And it stands on art, money, and technology. And if you're weak on any one of those three legs, the stool falls over. You got a problem, right? And so, let's see what my next slide is. Yeah, I already talked about this. The differences are, you mentioned storytelling quality, and these are the two things that I see as the big differences. A devotion to storytelling quality and also a global focus versus the dependable small market. How long are we going here, Robert?
Till 2.
Till 2, okay.
Another hour and 20 minutes.
Okay. Great. So let's talk a little bit about storytelling quality. Isaiah said, "Speak to me smooth words." Saying, God, don't tell me that stuff I don't want to hear, right? But great storytelling is storytelling of depth. It goes into the most difficult questions of what it means to be a human being and to live a good life, right? And there are lots and lots of different points of view on that. As a matter of fact, there are as many different points of view on that as there are human beings in existence. Now, one of the things that I would say, the thing that I'm most proud of as a teacher, teaching screenwriting for 22 years at UVU, is this. At UVU, we got the other stories. We got the stories that people couldn't tell at BYU.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, there you go.
And we had, in any given class, I would have a range of students that went from devoutly LDS to extremely anti to absolutely no knowledge of LDS and not caring about it. And everything in between. And yet, in 22 years of those classes where we were reading one another's scripts, we were giving feedback, we were analyzing one another's storytelling, The content of the story was never the discussion. It was never, I dispute what story you're trying to tell. It was, let's look at how you can tell your story better so that it comes across stronger and your vision comes through. I remember when we started the story editing lab that I created to train people to read other people's scripts in the Frank Daniel approach and to be able to give them feedback, and really it becomes almost a therapy kind of relationship where you're coaxing the story out of the person. One woman was writing her story of leaving the faith, okay? And we needed a volunteer to be her script consultant. And another student volunteered to be her script consultant. He said, I'm devout LDS, and I'm seeing in your story that you're portraying the LDS in a way that is cartoonish, that is silly, and it doesn't ring true. And I think you can do better. And from that point of view, he made her story much better. She looked at it and said, yeah, and she ended up writing a much better story. So that is a problem that we have to look at. And I have no problem with anybody taking a point of view, anybody saying, that's not a story I want to work on. That happened a few times. I did learn at one point that some things deserve warnings in advance. and it came out of a beautiful story, a heartrending story of a young black student writing the story of this guy who had been a rapper. And then he decided he was going to change his life, and he went to college and he studied marketing, and now he was going into his first job interview. And in the middle of this first job interview, the HR woman, it comes up that he had been a rapper. She says, oh, really? He said, oh, yeah, I've got stuff on YouTube. Says, oh, let's look at it. And he calls up his YouTube channel, and it spews out the most vile, misogynistic, obscene stuff. And it was absolutely right for the storytelling, because the guy just shriveled and saw his, all his hopes going down the drain. It was a heartbreaking scene. It was also a scene that, the woman who was reading the part of the HR woman deserved advance notice on that before she got into it, right? So there's that, and there's certainly, I have no problem with anybody dissociating themselves with certain kinds of storytelling. I don't have a problem with that. What I have a problem with is when you reach for assurance rather than depth. Are you going for the smooth words, or are you going to really explore what this person went through? How many of you have seen Truth and Treason? Okay, I strongly recommend it. To me, it is a breakthrough, it is a turning point in LDS storytelling, because it treats the story, first of all, there is no scintilla of public relations in it. It is not taking a stand for or against in any way. The faith tradition is an extremely important part of the storytelling. You all are familiar with the Huebner story, right? A young LDS man who is convicted and executed for distributing anti-Nazi literature in Germany using his branch's mimeograph machine. And it is nuanced. Even the Nazis are three-dimensional human beings that are struggling. And it's a brilliant piece of storytelling from that point of view. And this is a rap that I used to do to my students every year. I would say, Make stories about what you know, the culture that you know and love, but understand that The Godfather is not a Catholic movie. Schindler's List is not a Jewish movie. It is a movie where faith tradition is an extremely important element. And as you watch the final sequence of The Godfather, and the murders are going along in parallel action to a baptismal liturgy, and the obscenity of that and the violation is so clear and so powerful, and yet at the same time you have empathy with this character who found himself there. And it truly becomes a tragedy of Greek proportion. And an important part of that is the faith tradition. But you can make movies about a faith tradition without doing public relations, pro or con, right? And the purpose of that is what I think you were talking about, is just trying to make people feel good about themselves. Or was it you that was talking about that? Yeah. Just trying to make people feel good about, I have no problem with that also. But let's go into the depths and find out why it is that you feel good. Right now, by the way, I think one of the biggest hits so far this year is something I've been looking for a long time. And that is where we have a view of the future that is not a dismal, hellish dystopia. And I'm talking about Hail Mary, right? And this is a movie that is being acclaimed as a feel-good movie. At the same time, it goes deeply into the question of what it means to be a human being. And to be, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to experience to fulfill your mission as a human being? And that to me was, oh, okay, maybe we've turned a corner, because I found it very interesting that all visions of the future that we've seen have been so dark and so bleak. Is that really what we're looking for as a human race? Is that all we've got coming for us? Maybe there's hope for something better. Maybe we can do something better.
As long as we don't have to be drugged and forced into it.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, this reminds me, I had the good fortune shortly after Jaws was released to take a 2-day seminar with Verna Fields.
Okay.
Wow.
And she started her presentation with just a 2-shot and then cut back and forth between a man and a woman talking with no audio. And she said, "What's going on here?" And most of the class went, "Oh, they're falling in love." And she said, "Let's watch it again." And we watched it, and almost everybody changed their mind, said, "They're having a fight." She said, "You know what the difference is? 2 frames. We cut before or after she blinks." And we all are sitting there amazed, and she said, "And the decision to cut before or after the blink has to come from understanding the story you want to tell." It all goes. And if you don't understand the story, you can't make the movie. And in my efforts to try to do some projects, trying to sit down and figure out what the essence of the story really is absolutely the hardest part for me.
Yes.
So how do we do that? Oh, Master.
Obi-Wan.
He's laying it on me.
Obi-Wan.
The way we do it is, first of all, we have to take a certain kind of vow. And that vow is that I will honestly follow this story wherever it leads, no matter how uncomfortable that is. Okay? I'll give you an example from my own writing. I wrote my father's memoirs of World War II.
Sergeant Nibley, PhD.
Sergeant Nibley, PhD, yeah. And in doing that, I did a lot of research, and I found a lot of old letters that he wrote during the 1930s back and forth to this friend he had, and they would have these kind of intellectual argument back and forth, and in these letters, there was stuff that certainly by today's standards would be pretty ugly anti-Semitism. And my first thought was, well, I can't publish that. And my second thought was, I have to publish that. You know? And when I finished the draft of the book, I read it to my father, and he was shocked by a lot of what he had seen. And actually, what that ended up being is that created the arc of my story. This is a guy who was an intellectual, who was kind of a jerk, who was a smartass, you know, and he was throwing out these anti-Semitic remarks here and there. One of the things he said was, no one could ever accuse me of being a Jew. Well, he knew full well that his great-grandfather was the first Jew to convert to Mormonism, taught Joseph Smith Hebrew, made Brigham Young's dentures. He knew that. And then he goes into the army, and he's placed in intelligence, where he's doing translation and working with interrogation. And everybody he worked with was Jewish. And most of them got killed. And he came back a very different person. Before he went to war, he knew everything about war except what it was like, you know, and he found out what it was like. And so, yeah, but you see where I'm going with that, right? We have to be, and I am really not a fan of thumbs up, thumbs down, okay? And when I would train people to read other people's scripts, your first assignment is to find the strengths inside the script, because you can never fix a script based on what's wrong with it. You can only fix a script based on the strengths that are already there. And sometimes a student would come back and say, I can't find anything good in this script. I said, well, go back and read it again, because that's your job. First thing you have to do is to find something positive to give this writer, and then we build up from there. So I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that. Oh yeah, I'm not a fan of thumbs up, thumbs down. And I didn't mention this, but I recently started a podcast called Professional Film Analysis, where I'm doing Frank Daniel style analysis of films. And I differentiate that very strongly from criticism. There are so many people, you know, on the internet. You know, the thing about movies is it's the one topic in the world where everybody is an expert. Everybody in the world can tell you how Spielberg should have done that, you know. But making a movie is hard, right? So I don't do thumbs up, thumbs down. I do, at this point, I was bored. At this point, I was anxious. At this point, I laughed. How did they get me there? And that's analysis. Yeah, Robert?
I'm wondering if maybe what you're elucidating here is, you know, whether it was the rapper talking to the HR lady or your father or whatever. The question is, do you believe a person can change? In a good film, that's what it's all about, is character arc.
If that's the story you're telling. There are strong films about people who don't change, crash and burn, and that's tragedy, right? Or else they realize their fault too late. Michael Corleone does not find redemption. He self-destructs the same way Oedipus did, you know, or the same way, you know, Macbeth did. So, but I'm guessing that Robert is going to be telling stories about people who find a sense of redemption, and they complete that arc, and I'm fully supportive of those stories, right?
Very true stories.
Yeah. And we love to see that. We love to see that sense of growth, that sense of triumph. It's something Carl Jung called enantiodromia, which is the process whereby something becomes its own opposite. And that's great stories are stories of enantiodromia. In the scriptures it says the weak shall become strong, and the strong shall become weak. Right? That's enantiodromia. Okay?
Because that's life.
Yes.
And that's what we're living.
Yes. And as
Question over here.
as Robert said, yeah, I'll get you some question in just a second, Michael. Or Dave. Now I forgot where I was going with that. That's life. Yes.
Yeah, it's life.
Yes. Every culture ever in the world has developed storytelling. It is, and without storytelling, we would become deeply mentally ill. We need it to give structure and meaning to our lives. So, Dave.
So, I have a question. I'll give an example of how it affected me as a filmmaker. I made a World War II film called Devil's Men. But the challenge was, this was a true story based on letters that a LDS soldier sent back to his family. Dead and gone, but we had all his letters. His family wanted it, as they said, cleaned up. They did not want the world to see how he really was, which was that he smoked, he drank, and he cussed. He didn't fool around, but those elements were there. They didn't want that there. So I made a PG World War II film, which the distributor said, this isn't going to sell. So on that side of things, the distributor wanted at least put in some blood and guts. The family shot that down. I was creating a film that my employer was paying me to make.
Yeah.
And I, as the artist, wanted to tell the real story.
Yeah.
Now, that has affected me subsequently. I'm making a film right now all about kids. Kids are some of the toughest characters there are, and their behavior and their language can get pretty rough, especially skateboarders, of which I would say I was one.
Yeah, okay.
And so my question is, in order to make this change that you're talking about for Utah, where do we go? Can we tell a story without all the nitty-gritty, or do we have to go there?
Well, it depends on what how you define the nitty-gritty. I'm talking about the psychological and, if you will, the spiritual nitty-gritty. I'd rather see somebody tear their soul apart than hack somebody up with a machete.
Okay, yes.
Right? And actually, there's a technique that Frank Daniel taught, which he called indirection, and you'll see it used very often by good filmmakers. And that is where you've got a choice, and this is your two-frame cut kind of thing. You've got a choice. You've got violent action. You've got extreme physical action. Can be violence, can be sex. You have a choice to focus the camera on the action or to focus the camera on the reaction. When you go to the reaction instead of the action, what you get is the psychological impact rather than merely the physical stimulation, which hits your adrenaline and your...
Well,
yeah.
Great example of that, by the way. Who here saw the film by David Lean, Dr. Zhivago?
Yes.
There's a great scene in there where he had all the money to stage the Russian soldiers coming and wiping out this marching band of these musicians marching down the street. And he had all the money to just show that whole stage, but he decided not to show it, other than a couple of snippets right there. Instead, he focused on the reaction of Omar Sharif.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most powerful things
Yeah.
it could have been, because we as the audience understood all the other stuff, but what we were getting then was the emotional meaning and all of that.
Yeah, and I'm preparing to do an episode for my podcast. What I do is I will articulate a principle, and then I'll show it used in 5 different films. So I'm going to do one on indirection, and I'm going to use a David Lean film, but I'm going to use Oliver Twist. And there's a brilliant scene where Bill Sykes beats, what's her name, the woman to death. Nancy, yes. He beats her to death with his cane, right? And he's got this ugly dog that he goes around with. And instead of going to the beating, he cuts to the dog scratching at the door trying to get out of the room, which is much more powerful psychologically. So, get me out of here. And we invest in the dog, and it's like, get me out of this scene. This is horrific, rather than making ourselves inured to this. Now, we're dealing, by the way, everybody here is old enough that we didn't grow up with a smartphone in our hands. And the neurology of young people today is different. And they are greatly inured to a lot of this stuff that to us is way over the top. I went and saw Obsession, and I'm interested in analyzing it. It was a thoroughly unpleasant experience from beginning to end, but it's got a lot of attention, and I want to figure out why it does. So yeah.
Let me just insert a quick thing and have you comment, especially with Frank Daniels' perspective on it. And that is, to me, when you had asked early on at the very beginning about the kinds of films and what we're all about here and why we are not on a much higher level, I think one of the major issues is that very often LDS people, Utah people, are thinking in terms of here's a message, here's the meaning of it. Now, there's nothing wrong with that per se, but that's not the real crux of it, because it's the emotional and human aspects that we need to tap into so that the audience is tapping into them. Mm-hmm. And I say that because there are so many people ask me, why are so many R-rated movies made? It's like 65% almost of all films made are R-rated. And they're not the most profitable ones either. So one of the reasons is you write what you know and you make films what you know. Well, people who are living R-rated lives make R-rated films. But the issues here are a matter of action, consequence, connections. And action, consequence, connections are the things that either ring true to the audience, yes, I see how that connects, or this doesn't follow that. And it leaves the audience confused or empty. Action, consequence, connections that are true and meaningful are things that reach minds and hearts. And action, consequence impositions that are not true do not reach audiences. I think that's a big issue right there. If we get right to the real anatomy of much of filmmaking. Anyway, there's more to be said on that, but let me get back to your thoughts on.
Yeah.
It seems like we're sort of skirting the basic issue of there are gates that either open up our story to certain audiences or close the gate to certain audiences. And so part of it is not the storytelling issue, but the audience expectation issue in Utah. That things have to be one certain way and not anything else, and that the variety of what's individuals think is proper and not proper. So quick example, I was over the collection at a public library for a number of years. And people came in years ago and said, you do not have this book that's in the recommended book list in the Children's Friend. Well, I looked at the Children's Friend every month, and I looked at those recommended books, and they were awful. They were purposeless, benign, thoughtless nothings. And yet, because that came out in a church magazine, that did not last over a year. Because it finally got winnowed down that, hey, we do not pick books for the members of the church. We teach correct principles and let them govern themselves. And you have to know something in order to know to steer away from it in the future. But still, there were so many people that if it's not this squeaky clean thing, then it is wrong. We cannot talk to our children about this. We do not want to acknowledge this in our lives. We just want to say there's perfect thisness. And whether it's perfect whiteness or perfect blackness or perfect kindness or perfect betterness or perfect whatever, I think it's a problem with our audience of where they are in their spiritual guide as to whether how we deal with the story opens or closed gates. So I guess I'm asking, it seems like that's a particular problem in Utah. And that the only way going about it is to do, as you say, and think more globally. And so phrase it as faith and not specifics. And hope that it captures that bigger audience so that it comes back around to some of our audience in Utah so that they will give it a second look or a second opportunity to affect and touch their own lives.
Reaching into humanness.
Let me, I want to go off, I really appreciate those remarks, and yeah, would second them. You mentioned the concept of the message movie, and that's what I'm saying here without saying it, right? Depth versus assurance, making people feel comfortable. And here's, I don't want to get too deep and too abstruse here, but what I've been studying a lot, Katie, we should have a conversation about this, is brain research and how we react to movies, what parts of the brain trigger, what goes on in our minds. I saw a documentary once that was a beautiful documentary. Maybe some of you guys saw it. It was about storytelling, the storytelling contest. It followed these storytellers and how they, they trained and they go to these competitions. They were so good at what they did, but they were just telling the stories from their families' lives. And I was watching and I was going, oh man, this is so cool. I want to go and get all my family stories. And then I want to, record them and, make sure that they're saved. And I watched this whole document, and then at the last couple minutes, a narrator comes on and says, and you, why don't you gather your family stories and save them all so that they will be preserved? And immediately my hackles went up and I went, don't tell me what to do, because that's the kind of guy I am, right? So
that wasn't from Angel Studios, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was many years ago. But yeah. So So talking about the message movie, one of the things that we do in a film, and what film does more powerfully than any other medium, is to draw us into an imaginal world. And for lack of a better term, there's some neurological dispute about this. I'm going to call it the right hemisphere of the brain, that awakens the imagination. This is where the emotions of awe, of love, the sense of beauty live in the right hemisphere of the brain. And the first, I've got an episode up on my podcast about how the first obligation of a filmmaker at the beginning of your movie is you got to separate the audience from the outside world and draw them into an alternative world where they're going to spend time with you. And they've got to release their sense of disbelief, right? Well, where does the disbelief live? Well, the left hemisphere of the brain is all about disbelief. It's categorizing, labeling, saying this is right and that's wrong. Thumbs up, thumbs down, that lives in the left side of the brain. On the right side of the brain lives all this other stuff. So when you go to the message, when at the end of that documentary they started preaching to me and telling me what I was supposed to do, they activated the right hemisphere, the left hemisphere, and I said, no way. But they had me. They totally had me. I was there. So here's the thing. When you tell a message, you lose the message.
Yeah.
It's a paradox. When you make when the message is explicit, you will lose the true message, which is an enantiodromia that takes place inside the soul of the viewer. So you end up with your boss, Dave, telling you to appeal to the left hemisphere of the brain, and you are left shackled so that you can't get to the real story, right? So you don't want to leave people leaving the theater going, okay, they told me what I'm supposed to do, so I'll go home and do what they told me to do, right? No, you want to leave them, and here's the thing. The right hemisphere of the brain is less verbal, and it has trouble labeling things. So you want them to leave with a sense of awe, a sense of, I don't know exactly what I just saw, but I know it was powerful. Katie.
So one of the interesting things is that in the brain studies and stuff is that we are predisposed to want to go into a story world. In fact, our automatic functioning really almost goes off. That's why you're a potential victim in the theater. Someone who should have done sometime before you realize, oh my gosh, it's a gun. Because we actually shut it out. We can immerse ourselves in a story better than we can in real life. Because anything that would naturally distract us is turned off. And so it's like the most powerful vehicle to getting your experience out as long as you go through.
Yeah. So I'm writing an article right now which is about AI and what I think AI cannot do, and looking at brain studies about facial recognition, how the ability of faces to recognize emotions, the ability of the brain to recognize falsehood, and comparing that to great acting performances, which contain so much nuance and so much layered and often conflicting emotions that it's not just that they have to get the programming better and better, it's that they're going in the wrong direction. It is not a linear thing. AI is a great left hemisphere. It's not really good at awe or beauty, right? And yeah, so one of the things I'm looking at in there is this whole question of, how you draw them in and get the suspension of disbelief. And last night I had a flash where I got to rewrite the whole thing because I just realized how well Shakespeare does it at the beginning of Henry V, where he says, I'm going to give you a big, huge story that is way too big to fit within this wooden O, and you're going to have to use your imaginations. Think, when we speak of horses, that you see them printing their proud hoofs in the receiving earth and all this stuff. And he says, use your imaginations because that's where we're going to go. Well, people are still watching that play after 400 years. Any movies that fit that category? Go here and then there.
I was watching Project Hail Mary.
Yes.
And there were teenagers right next to me on their phones during the previews and all that stuff. And the movie started. And it caught me easily in the first minute. I was gone. It used to be you had a couple of minutes to hook an audience. Nowadays, how much time do you think we have to hook an audience?
Well, what I say in my podcast is this. It has to start either with the first frame of the first shot, or else before the first frame of the first shot in the credits. You'd have no time. You've got to immediately start putting the hook in them. How much time do you ultimately have? That's a harder question. It's a challenge to get them involved.
It's so hard. I'm trying to write some stuff right now. And
yeah.
It's just, I've rewritten the first scene like 40 times.
Yeah.
And it's just an industrial safety and training film, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
It's not even a story.
Yeah.
That's when they start with the shootout, and then they say 2 hours earlier. How's the film?
But
3
that's,
days
yeah.
later?
And then how to fix, prevent the accident.
Yeah, well, we've lost something. There are other things that we have lost or we are in danger of losing, and we could possibly bring them back. There is a communal aspect to the cinema experience, especially with comedies, but also with drama, that it is a very different experience when you watch it with an audience. When COVID hit, and I had signed in my film analysis class watching Moonstruck, I had students who came back and said, "Did you assign this on purpose as an example of a really bad movie?" And I had never, I had used the movie many times before, and the classes loved it. It's very different when you're sitting in a room with all those people. We've lost that. And by the way, I don't believe that making theaters into lounges is helpful. I think it's helpful if you have to sit up and watch a movie rather than have a recliner and a blanket and your food and all this kind of stuff. I don't think
fall asleep.
I don't think that's
nicely.
I don't think that's making the movie experience that much stronger. The other thing is we are losing our comedies and our tragedies. And instead we have, and by the way, comedies and tragedies both appeal to the right hemisphere of the brain. That laughter, when you see a paradox, a comic discrepancy, where two things don't fit together, and the audience the brain has to either reject it or let off that, and that comes out as laughter, right? We're losing tragedies. And instead we are getting cortisol dumps and adrenaline.
Yes.
Which is the experience of obsession in some of these other horror films that we've seen out. And horror is very, very popular right now. Now, if you watch the films of somebody like Guillermo del Toro, Frankenstein, The Shape of Water, Pan's Labyrinth, these are horror films that go deep into the psychological archetypes. But the standard horror film now is, well, I've got a theory about it that I won't get too deep into, but it's basically the arc is trying to get back to normal. The best thing that can happen is that they get away from the monster, they kill the monster, or whatever it is that's intruded into their reality somehow goes away and leaves them the way they were before. But there's no growth. There's no transcendence. They're not a more enlightened person at the end of the movie.
They're just survivors.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if you watch Del Toro's movies, there's an arc. There's an arc. Those characters change. There is transcendence, and there's great beauty in his horror movies. So it can be done, and his horror movies are much more like classical tragedies. But we are losing the sense of the character who is, taken up by his own hubris and encounters nemesis and is eventually destroyed by his own decisions. We're losing that, and we're losing the great comedies. Now, instead of great comedies, we have melodramas with jokes in them. That's not the same thing as a comedy. A comedy is when we see the improbability, the silliness, and we project our own silliness into there, just as we look up to the tragic hero and admire the tragic hero, and that's what gives us the catharsis as we watch the self-destruction. But the same thing is true with comedy. So we need these.
I think, well,
Yeah.
Can you give an example of the good comedy and the bad comedy?
Sure. I mean, well, I just cited Moonstruck. It's where a woman who is supposed to, get married to this guy ends up falling in love with her brother, and that is an improbable situation. It's a romantic comedy, so there is a balance of the romantic story versus the comedic story. But that's a good. If you want to go further into pure comedy, Some Like It Hot, is considered the prototypic comedy. And there you have this comic discrepancy of men who are trying to pass as women, and all the shenanigans they get into and all the crazy stuff that leads to. And we enjoy watching their pain. Comedy is the pain of people we feel a certain superiority towards, right? And one theorist uses the word malice, that we must have a certain malice towards the characters in order to really laugh at them. But you can see that if you watch Seinfeld, George Costanza, that's a true comedy. Those are ridiculous people, and the worst thing that can happen to George Costanza, the louder we laugh. But then there are other sitcoms where it all turns out right in the end, and everybody has a group hug, and there are jokes along the way, but it isn't this thing where we actually have this malice and we are laughing at these people's stupidity. This is where we learn about our own stupidity on a vicarious level, right? So, yeah, we need that, and we need to find that again. Yes.
The last line of Joey Brown.
Greatest line ever.
It is.
I don't know that movie.
oh, no, in
Some Like It Hot.
Some Like It Hot.
It's unlike.
Oh, yeah.
The last
Nobody's
line,
perfect.
On the
very
boat.
last line
Yeah.
leaves the problem 100% open,
Yeah.
and you have to just hit your knee
Yeah.
and go,
Yeah.
"Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
You know, it's so brilliant, and it's been so easy
Yes.
to not put that last line in there.
Yes. And so I did some analysis on Bridget Jones's Diary in one of my podcast episodes, and that's a good example of a comedy. And one of the things you notice is how real the pain of the characters is. It's a torture story. She goes through horrible things, and we laugh and laugh and laugh at her. So it's, thank goodness it's not me, right? Yes.
This has been fascinating for me as not being a filmmaker, but a film goer.
Uh-huh.
And I find myself, like everybody in here, we're waxing nostalgic a little bit because we're missing what we've experienced in the past. And so even when I'm on my streaming platform, I find myself going back to movies that are 10, 15, 20, even 30 years old, because the new fare is not working for me.
Only 30?
So I guess
Have you seen The General?
So I guess my question is how do we fix that?
It's the burning question. It's been mentioned that Hollywood is in complete disarray. You have what I would analyze as an industry where the product is a right brain experience and it's completely run by left brain people. So it's accountants making casting and script decisions. And look at the result. Everybody wants something new and fresh and exciting, as long as it's the same thing that made money last year.
It's a money-making business. Come on.
Well, that's one leg of
That's
the stool.
what Hollywood is. Yeah.
Right? And I see people saying, oh, you know, the problem with filmmakers is they neglect the business. And I hear the artists saying, oh, the problem with the industry is that it's all run by executives. And then there are the technological people who say, hey, I've got a 28,000K camera. Let's make a movie. Do you have a script? No, but I got a great camera. Let's make a movie. No, it doesn't work like that.
There you
Okay?
go.
Yes.
So I was talking to a school psychologist. Her emphasis is elementary school age, okay? And this whole problem of how do we find and connect with our audiences, because if you don't connect to an audience, nobody ever gets to watch your product, your film. And she says that kids nowadays, they cannot even describe what they see when they open their front door and go into their own homes. They have lost the ability to visualize. And yet, what are we doing with film? And the story is we are trying to use the right side of our brain to visualize, to imagine, to vicariously experience. And yet the door is really closed because of all the things that we've talked about today. And so how do we sneak in that back door, or what do we do? Because if you're talking about an audience who can no longer visualize, then how do we as storytellers in film or whatever medium introduce them to abandoning the sense of reality or present day reality to go on that journey with us that allows them to explore. So the journey has to allow self-exploration by your audience individual members. But how do we get over that first hurdle to grab them? So
Yeah.
we can start having these experiences of visualization, which she says, I cannot get kids in elementary school to even describe what their front room looks like when they open the front door.
Wow.
This goes back to what you brought up earlier about the kids and the phone in the movie. It's attention span. The attention span of our audiences has gone down to nothing, and you don't have to just hook them once in the movie. You have to keep hooking them all the way through the story. And it's like, I know and see people fast forwarding through, even through reels. You've got a 1 minute or a 30-second reel. Oh, too long. The attention span has gone nuts. And I mean, how do you fix that? That's a whole different can of worms.
Yeah.
I started writing as a journalist, and my training there, and my degree is in communications. My training there was write to a 5th grade audience.
Yeah.
When I started writing screenplays, I realized I had to change to a 4th grade audience. And I'm serious. I have to, I spend time analyzing reactions. I do table reads before I even get to film. And I take people and sit them in a room, show my film, and I work their brains. I find out from them. And I do that on purpose because I want to know how I can change to make it a more awesome film for my viewers in the future. What I have discovered is that they don't have the ability to reason and think. You have to explain it to them. They have to, so I do things with dialogue I would not otherwise do. I have one character explaining to the other character why, so the audience will get it. And I'm finding that to be destructive of the creative process that I'm trying to go through. And it's making my film take longer.
Yeah, you guys are looking at me like I'm going to solve all these problems. If I could solve all these problems,
Today.
if I had the quick, easy solution, I would be so rich.
Let's hear
You know,
from Katie,
yeah.
and then I want to add some things to
Yeah,
it.
there are a lot of hands up here, so let's get everybody. Yeah, Katie?
My understanding is that you're going to tell us some really cool things about working on a budget and some of the things that you found from the research. Are we going to get into that?
I can tell you about a project I'm working on right now where I am wrestling with these questions that people are raising. I can't guarantee that it's going to be a home run, but I'm taking all this stuff into account and putting together a project. So yeah, I can talk about that.
We would be very interested in your observation.
Okay, yeah. Well, we'll talk about that. Let's get
Wade?
some of these from back here.
Okay.
Yes.
Alex, I wanted to run back to what you were talking about, the storytelling documentary.
Mm-hmm.
The American storytellers have found, as they go all around the nation, Donald Davis he's like the grandfather of American storytelling, and his motto is, "You are the museum of your own life. If you don't tell it, who will?" And they have found that I would say about 99% of the people that they're talking to think, nothing happened to me, I'm not special, I don't know how to write. They just, put off and put off and put off. And so that last sentence, they really weren't talking to you, and I'm not disclaiming anything you said. They were talking to all of those other people who lots of times just need someone to say, go, do it, you can do it.
No, that was my just obstreperous personalities popping out there. But yeah, who else had their hand up? Yes.
I was just going to say, with what you were saying, Dave, was that I was in a meeting with BYU TV, and they said, and this was very recent, they said, if you can get the 8-year-old, that's what we're looking for. They're trying to get the 8-year-old to BYU TV. And if you watch most of their programming, it's, you hook the 8-year-old, you get the mom. You get the mom, you get the rest of the family. So that's what they're looking at.
Wade, you had a comment?
Yeah, so my name's Wade. I work part of the evil part of the organization of filmmaking sometimes. I do market research, and so I get to test with audiences what people think, and I give that insight back to creatives. And I think it was a really interesting comment, but you've talked about quality and what makes a filmmaking community, and I think it's something that is missing across the industry right now is risk, that creative risk that people are willing to take, because I think the reason Hollywood's in such disarray is they don't get the funds back from going to the theater. If it does bad, it goes straight to streaming, so they lose all the money, so they get told these things, and so they stay in the safe bounds. And so I think what makes a really strong filmmaking community is not telling someone, just know that's not a bad idea, but actually allowing them to have that risk of, is this an innovative idea?
Absolutely. And so we end up in a paradoxical situation where an industry where the product is risk. If you don't experience some kind of jeopardy during a movie, the movie falls flat.
Yeah.
And yet the industry is focused on risk aversion. So you see the result that happens. We end up with franchise after franchise after franchise trying to duplicate the last moneymaker. So, but let me try to be hopeful on some things, because a lot of this is, overwhelming. We're dealing with an audience that, and we're all old enough that we're going, no, it shouldn't be like this. We remember, sitting there, and watching Raiders of the Lost Ark for the first time and going, wow, we had that experience. One thing that hasn't changed is the human need for story. That's a constant. And we have to hook into that, and we have to provide a quality experience. I have to believe that if we do that, if we provide a quality storytelling, story experiencing event, then it's going to have an impact and it will find a market. We have that three-legged stool. We're not poets where you can sit down and, it's the cost of a pencil to make your poem. If there isn't a market, an audience in proportion to the budget, you're probably not going to make another movie, or it's going to be that much harder. Still, most movies fail. And when you're taking risks, some of those risks aren't going to pan out. So I talked a little bit about global focus. I think one of the things we need numerous quality projects in development. And we need a productive development pipeline that works really hard, mostly on getting the scripts right. Most of the movies I see that fail because of the script. You can make a bad movie from a good script. You can't make a good movie from a bad script. So this is kind of, and all these are easy to say, right? I can talk about the project I'm working on and how I'm approaching some of these questions because it's a challenge. There's also this problem.
Funding, yeah.
The chickens and the eggs. And that is that you can't get funding until you prove profitability. You can't get profitable until you get the funding, right? So somewhere along the line, there has to be a break in that. Usually it comes from finance people who, well, this is one of the things where I'm taking a turn in my own development process. I was developing a project that I saw had great profit potential as a low-budget breakout film. The more I got into it and the more research I did and the more people I talked to, I realized that's not why people invest in small budget feature films. They invest because they're passionate about the movie, and then all the spreadsheets will kind of confirm that it's okay for them to make that decision. It is not the first rate. If people just want to make money, they're smart and they know where to put their money in it and get a for sure return on it. And it's not in movies, right? I don't know, do you guys want to see?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, this is,
Yes, please.
okay, let's, go to a different,
What they're saying now is, I think, proof of concept. If you can shoot a 10-minute proof of concept, sometimes you can get funding from that.
there are a lot of ways. There are a lot of ways. Why is my other
In fact,
project
Angel
not showing?
uses that model. If if you get a good proof of concept film to them through their guild, and it passes their 70% threshold, you can move forward with them. They did this at the Zion's Film Festival. Those two guys came in and told us.
Yeah,
But they spent $125,000 on their proof of concept.
Well, that's what I was going to say. The problem there is, the challenge there is, okay, I want, say, $1 million or $500,000 or whatever.
Right.
To get a proof of concept is going to take you almost half of that to have it look decent.
Well, they spent about $125,000,
Yeah.
and it looked really cool.
Yeah.
And they got past their guild, and they're working now. They're moving forward with the full length.
The angel concept is very interesting one to watch
It is.
because it's different from Hollywood. They have a different relationship to their audience. Whether it pans out in the long term is the jury's out on that, and the measure of the quality also is a consideration. So I'm trying. How do I close out my one project and
Open the other.
open the other? My wife does all the, and by the way, she's a movie marketing person. She does my sheets here. I don't want to add it to this template. I want to.
Is this the film you're working on?
Yeah. And
Is it? Do you have the pitch? You're going to show us the pitch deck? Is that
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody know Canva well enough to get me out of my one
No.
deck and into another one?
Just click on it.
Do you got the
Wait a
back
minute.
arrow, the back arrow?
Wait a minute. Here, let me do this. Here we go. Okay. This is a regional film. It's focused on local culture. It is a thriller. We expect it to get a PG-13 rating. And it involves themes of, well, I'll give you the log line. It's That's the disclaimer that tells you you're going to lose all your money if you give it to me. And this focuses on right now, and this is an insight that my daughter gave me, that I showed her the pitch deck, and she's a marketing person too. She's been doing marketing for the U of U. And she said, you don't realize, you're not showing in your pitch deck that this is a Utah moment right now. Everybody's focused on Utah culture, and there are all these reality shows and everything. So this is a script that came from a former student of mine. It's about this young woman, Kat, or Catherine, who is 15 years old, living on a polygamous compound in the middle of Nevada. She has no knowledge of the outside world. She's had no contact with the world. And one day she discovers that her patriarch father has murdered her mother. So she runs. And she heads for Salt Lake City, where she knows she has a brother that she has not seen for many years, and she's going to find him to bring him back to kill their father. Okay?
So it's a nice family movie.
Yes, it is. Like I say, we are targeting a market of women 18 to 34. That's the target market. That happens to be the demographic that buys the most movie tickets. Okay? I'm not focusing on a local market because a lot of local people probably wouldn't like this movie. Although I think a lot of them would if they give it a chance, There are themes of sexual abuse in it, but that never appears on camera. It's never explicit. And there is some physical violence that goes pretty far. And hopefully we can keep it in a PG-13 with that. But the violence is done more through all of that is done more through the techniques of indirection. Because ultimately this is a story, thematically this is a story about female empowerment. This is taking the most disempowered young woman and watching her journey to find her own soul. And also, the other thing I really wanted to avoid was I didn't want it to be a revenge movie where the best thing that can happen is that she kills her dad. The best thing that can happen is that she discovers herself, and she discovers that there is a whole world out there that she could be involved in, and she could have a life, So, oh yeah, there's the pack, the log line I just gave you. It's a feature thriller. It's 1.1 million, and this is in the process of evolving.
You have the log line?
Yeah, that's the log line. When 15-year-old Kat discovers her polygamous prophet father has murdered her mother, she escapes with no knowledge of the world, no resources, but her ingenuity and grit. She sets out to find her long-lost brother to get him to help her kill their father, avenge her mother, and perhaps discover her own soul. There's a little bit more synopsis. But you're talking about how we're addressing these issues. Now, one of the decisions that we made, and it's a low-budget feature, right, is I am casting my daughter as Kat. That's my daughter, Sophia. And she uses her mother name when she acts. I wanted to use her because I see in her a certain quality where the camera just loves her and it looks right into her soul. And we did, now, and one of the questions that we've struggled with is, do we attach a name that will help us get distribution? There's a guy who does research, marketing research on the film industry named Stephen Fellows. He's a British guy. He does very in-depth research, and he comes up with very interesting numbers. He has a couple of articles. One article he wrote was, how do independent features make a profit? And he goes through 14 different attributes that are in common with low-budget feature films that make money. He did another article on what attributes in a feature film will help you get distribution. Now, in the 14 that tell you why they're profitable, nowhere does a name recognizable actor appear. It's simply not a factor in profitability.
For low
To get for distribution, it's the number one criterion that a distributor looks for. Okay? What does that tell you? It tells you distributors don't really understand what makes films profitable. And also, the Hollywood idea is you need to attach a name. So we're looking at, do we attach a name? We might attach a name in the place of her
brother.
Of her brother. Yeah.
You have
No, I don't. No, I don't.
To get distribution.
to get distribution.
Maybe, maybe not. There are alternatives to a traditional distributor. There are people who are building their own audiences. Now it has become more and more important that you engage before you're even financed. And so this last week, I went down, these are other actors who are attached. I will be playing the nasty old guy. Some of these are people that I met shooting Horizon. And this is one that I'm going to move up, and I'm padding this part. Valine Darby, played by Jan Broberg. Jan Broberg runs she has a podcast, and she runs an organization for abuse survivors, and because she was kidnapped and held against her will for over a year and was repeatedly abused. So she has a network. She is hooked into people who have millions of followers on YouTube. So here's the thing that's scaring Hollywood like crazy. If we're going straight to streaming, I don't need a streaming platform. What they're scared of is YouTube. If I can get Jan has a Netflix movie made about her life, and there are documentaries and stuff about her, and they have over 10 million views. So if I can attract 3 million people to watch my movie on YouTube, then I can pick which distributor I want, right? Now it's not all that pat, and it's not all that easy. But what I'm saying is nobody knows how it works right now. Nobody can tell you absolutely this is the way the next big hit will be made. Why did Obsession get made for $750,000 and within 2 weeks do $300 million in the box office? Made by a YouTuber 22 years old who had never made a feature.
That's a good question. That's the question, right?
Well, he got that deal because of his YouTube following. Okay? And more. There's a film, you can Google this, called Hundreds of Beavers. And Hundreds of Beavers was made for a few $100,000. They four-walled it. They put it out on YouTube. And now it's getting distribution offers from streaming platforms after it has well made its money back and is deep in the black. So how do I put that into a business plan? Where I originally, my original idea was, well, we go to film festivals and then you try to get a distributor. And so, do we spend our money on a film festival campaign, or do we hire a name actor to come in and do it? And we've talked to name actors. We haven't decided to go that path yet. And I'm not completely opposed to that if we can make the budget work. But, this was actually a question that I asked to Claude, the AI. I said, should I attach a name actor? Claude came back and said, Jan Broberg has 10 million views on Netflix. She was already attached to play a very small part. Well, I'm going to beef her part up. And so the key word now is flexibility and innovation and being engaged with the marketing aspect of it. You cannot neglect that leg of the stool. I'm most in love with film because of the artistic aspects of it. But what I believe you have to do is if you see yourself as an artist, understand that money is a creative tool in the same way any other part of the filmmaking process is. If you're going to be an artistic director, then you need to understand lenses, you need to understand acting technique, and you need to understand money.
And visual storytelling.
Yes, yeah.
Do we know what Angel paid for Ben Kingsley and Kelsey Grammer in Young Washington?
Well, their budget was 20 million that I understand.
It was 20 million?
Their budget, their full production budget. I don't know what they paid them.
Yeah. And we'll see, I mean, right now it has 57% on Rotten Tomatoes, so we'll see if that translates into the success. But most Angel movies have lost money. Their whole organization has survived primarily on the strength of Sound of Freedom, right, which went huge into the black and has been able to carry them, that plus their subscriber base.
Yeah.
When you figure they have 2 million plus subscribers paying $16 a month, that's some cash flow, right? So I'm not opposed to the Angel model. I think there are some inherent problems with it. One of the inherent problems, Truth and Treason came out of that. And as I expressed, I admire that project, and I think it's a breakthrough. It didn't have the success that the filmmakers wanted it to have, both at the box office and in the festival circuit. And the word I got was that Angel doesn't know how to work the festival circuit. And Truth and Treason is a movie that could have done very well on a festival circuit. The other question is that Truth or Treason was approved by the Angel Guild when they had about 200,000 members, and most of those were LDS. Now they have over 2 million, and a large chunk of that is evangelicals who don't like Mormons. And so the question arises, would Truth and Treason be approved if it were presented to the Guild today? I don't know. That's an open question. So I think Angel is something to really keep an eye on, and what can other filmmakers learn from that? One of the things that I think is really good is getting in touch with the audience up front, getting in touch with the financing, getting connection between the audience and the financing before you get deep into the process.
Joseph, and then Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say, from a business perspective, kind of thinking of the way that Young Washington was put together, and I don't know the whole story of how it was brought to Angel, but a lot of that was by the Wonder Project. That was the production house that did that, and they sold it to Angel. So that wasn't, the fact that those actors were involved was a plus for Angel Studios, because I think they have another film coming out called The Brink of War. But a lot of times actors are also just looking for projects that seem to be kind of steam projects, or things that can get them back into the public eye. Ben Kingsley and Kelsey Grammer, they're looking for projects, and so they may have taken a pay cut because they were just looking for a project. And so just from a
right. Andy Serkis is another one that's in there, that was in there. Yeah, it'll be I think it's a model that's really interesting to keep an eye on. I go back to script. I'm not a critic. If they brought that script to me, we'd have some long conversations. Yes.
Well, I was thinking about this new change in funding and everything, the various things, and I have a friend, he calls himself the Crazy Rocket Man.
Yeah.
And he puts pulse jet engines on skateboards and goes across highways.
Okay. Wow. Is this Acme?
No.
Is there Coyote involved?
It's real. He's just completely nuts. And he had a YouTube channel for a bunch of years with no beard. And he also, I did one thing where I followed him with a drone and had 3 cameras. Now, all of his stuff is shot with a phone on a broomstick. Okay? He grew a beard, and all of a sudden, he's making huge amounts of money on YouTube. And I've talked to him, so I said, what?
Go for it, Steve.
You need a broomstick?
Well, you need to talk to my wife, because I had a big beard coming out of Horizon, and she didn't like it at all.
Well, and is there any way in the world to predict how, like, your pitch and your YouTube short and stuff like that is going to make money? Or
No.
is that just...
No, there are a lot of people who have certain formulas, you know. And
I keep thinking about buying one of the formula books, you know.
yeah, I mean, there was Tracy Hainsworth, you know, who worked at. She worked in marketing in the industry, and she had a system that she taught at UVU to the producing classes called a green light system. But again, it's all based on past stuff.
Right.
And only 1 minute commercials.
Yeah.
1 minute, and it's basically marketing. I took it.
Oh, yeah, yeah. My wife also took the class, and I know Tracy well. We're running out of time, so we've got to wrap it up. And we haven't answered the question of how you make all this work. The fact is, Orson Welles said something. I've tried to track down the source, but I can't. He said, Hollywood is full of 26-year-old MBAs who are saying, you know, this is how you make money, that's how you make money. And they're doing all this market research. He says the one thing that no one will ever tell you in a market research survey is, I want to see something I've never seen before. Okay? So the solution to that, I had this slide up there, but what you need is, you need not just one project. You need to have a slate of projects, and the more the better. There is a huge, what's the word I'm after? Disparity. There is an asymmetry in the film market. So, and that is that the audience pays the same price for a $200 million movie or a $2 million movie. And so the $200 million movie that does $20 million at the box office is a flop. The $2 million movie that does $20 million has very happy investors, right? So if you can spread risk out, if you have 10 films and one breaks through, you paid for all the others, right? So,
Mark, you had a comment?
Yes.
I had a comment. I've had special interest in Angel Studios because years ago they had a platform called Memory Learn. Memory Learn was a memoir building tool, and I made their books.
Oh, cool.
So I know Neil Harmon quite well, and that story evolved then into VidAngel, which got sued by the big studios,
right.
Lost, you know, multi-million-dollar suit.
Yeah.
Now we have Angel Studios. My point is, I think what I've learned from Neil, and one more thing. Bookbinding. Library Binding Institute, what I was a member of, there was 80 to 100 binders. The internet came. I would say that I'm probably the last one left.
Wow.
And the reason I say that is because you have to change.
Yeah.
Angel Studios changed, and they'll change more.
Yeah.
And so we have to avoid, and we've all been guilty of this, I think, we have to avoid getting stuck in what we know, the
right.
audiences we know.
Right.
We have to evolve.
Yeah.
If we don't evolve, Angel Studios will not be the same today, or excuse me, 2 years from now as they are today. We've already seen that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because budgets are going up, different things. So it's another alternative. Maybe this group comes up with a third alternative.
Yeah.
So my point is, we can't wax nostalgic. We've got to move forward.
Yeah. Robert, and then I'll wrap it up here.
When you talk about market research, it's very important. I worked for Sun Classic for 2 years, and they were probably the most successful independent film company, and certainly in Utah, and maybe a lot of the rest of the industry for the time that they were in action. And when you talk about Orson Welles, at the Utah U.S. Film Festival, which preceded Sundance, there was a panel there, and Orson Welles was there, as well as Chuck Sallier, the head of our company. And the discussion came up about the usefulness of market research in determining the success of the film. And Orson Welles said, I don't want to have a computer tell me what movie to make. But Chuck turned around and said to him, well, Mr. Welles, with all respect, how many ideas do you have for, films that you want to make right now? Maybe a dozen? He said, yeah. Wouldn't you like to know which one is going to be most successful at the box office? And so the idea, Sun Classic had a system made up where they would actually take a one-page concept of the film, and then they did hundreds of these throughout the year. And then they would go out and have market research teams ask people about it. They had a questionnaire that they had developed, which was very revealing in terms of what people really wanted to see. And they never lost money on a movie.
And Roger Corman never lost money on a movie. And
well, he did them for $100,000.
Well, I mean, I want to leave this on a hopeful note because I am hopeful. I mean, yeah, a lot of things have changed. And a lot of us are over the hill, and yet I think that we have something to offer to younger generations. We have a sense of storytelling that they haven't experienced, and the need for that storytelling is still there. How do we make that happen? Well, we stay true to stories. And at the same time, we stay flexible in how you get those stories across. So we've been given this gift of this amazing technology. Do you realize what a transformation it was when they invented the close-up? That neurologically, you could have 1,000 people in the same proximity to a face as a baby with its mother. The neurological impact of that is enormous, and we haven't begun to really understand that. But that's part of the reason that this is such a powerful medium. The sense of empathy with which we can attach to cinematic characters is unparalleled in any other medium. Literature can put you inside their mind, but a movie can put you inside their body. And you can feel their emotions and their physical sensations. So, what's the magic formula? Sorry, I don't got it. But I think there are a lot of options that we have. We have to stay rooted in traditional story. That goes back all the way to Aristotle. And storytelling really hasn't changed since then. We have to be honest with ourselves and realize when our scripts aren't good enough and they need another 4 or 8 drafts. We need to be flexible in the way we conceive of these things, in the way we approach audiences that have different attitudes and habits for viewing. And we need to be innovative and creative in finding new ways to reach those. And I'm counting on you guys. Should we make it happen?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Robert.
Sure appreciate it.
Best of luck on your film.
Thank you. And now I have to redo this because we've got these new, notice I had to go back as far as 2016 to find good ones to compare. Now in the last year, we've got 3 that have done hundreds of millions on low budgets.
Yeah.
So Obsession, Backrooms, and Iron Lung of just, so it changed. All of a sudden, everybody's looking for 22-year-old YouTubers that they can hire to make features.
Oh, wow.
We'll see how that works out a year from now.
See if I can get a time machine and go back.
Yeah. Thank you all for your attention and
Yeah,
all your
thank
good
you.
input. Thank you.
Well, it's been fun.
Terrific. Thank you.
Filmmaking is still fun, even, yeah.